So today we are going to talk about barbecued pork ribs that you can make in your house. And the key to this is preparation. There's two options that you have. You can score the membrane, which basically means turning the pork over, cutting along the individual pieces between the ribs, or you can pull the membrane off. If you want ribs that are just going to fall apart and be super tender and literally fall off the bone, you want to pull this membrane off. You can see here it does take some force, but if you can get your finger underneath, you should be able to pull it right off. Whatever you do not drink this. Seriously, it's gonna taste disgusting. Okay, so what you wanna do is you wanna get your brine ready in order to put the ribs into. I normally like to brine overnight, but today I just don't have enough time. So what I'm gonna end up doing is brining for about 4 hours before I get everything dried and then put it into the oven. The brine is gonna help add additional flavor and also protect the meat itself as you are cooking it for such a long period of time. The salt is gonna help absorb additional water into the meat, giving it that extra little bit of flavor, but also allow it to endure a long cook time up to that 190-degree temperature, which is ideally where we wanna hit. That's gonna help render fat, that's gonna help render the bone marrow, that's gonna give you that extra tender meat that you're really looking for in a pair of ribs. Now here is the result of the brining process. You can see the meat itself is slightly looser. It has a certain texture to it that has been basically softened through this process. So what we're gonna do after this is we're gonna cover this in a seasoning rub. Now this is a basic rub. I didn't put too many seasoning and spices and such in here simply because my family doesn't really like it. You want to flavor the meat and continue to add additional flavor to it. Remember, you got a long cooking process ahead of you, and this seasoning is going to form around and give you a good, almost crust-like quality to the top of the meat itself. Okay, even though we already brined the meat, we still need to prepare a rub. I prefer a dry rub when I am cooking, so I'm going to use brown sugar, I'm going to use salt, and you want to use the smaller, finer grain salt. You don't want to use coarse salt with this. The other pieces that I'm going to use here, you're going to see a little bit of pepper, you're going to see garlic powder, you're going to see onion powder, and a little bit of cayenne as well, and also just a touch of sweet smoked paprika, allspice, or cinnamon. I normally don't combine all of those together. You can see here I'm doing cinnamon and allspice with this particular rub. So once you are done with the rub, you're going to want to put down 1 to 2 pieces of aluminum foil. This is going to be necessary for the actual cooking process. It also gives you a nice place to be able to work on. So you're going to put the rib down. I prefer to put down meat side up, so that I can put the seasoning and the rub on top of it and then flip it over so that it is in the right direction for the actual cook. You'll see here I did it backwards, but it's honestly okay how you do this. So the trick here is you're going to want to have a nice even coat throughout the rib, and you want to rub it in, physically rub it into the creases and the crevices of the ribs themselves. This is going to get you a good crust. This is going to get you good flavor transfer into the meat itself. And this is the meat side up. You can see I'm still rubbing it in. Use as much of the seasoning as you need. You can always mix up more. Don't be sparing on this. The extra sugars and the extra spices are basically just going to end up in the fat itself. I have never had a salty rib come out of the oven in this method. So you're not going to be able to over season this, so go to town. All right, so here we have the rub in place. We have the membrane side up, and we are basically just going to temp this. And the goal here is to trap the heat. We want the heat and the temperature inside of here to act as almost if it's a mini oven. Now you can see I have more room here, so that's just where another piece of aluminum foil is going to come into play. I like the meat side down because when the fat and the bone marrow starts to render, it's going to go down into the meat as opposed to away from the meat. And that's exactly where you want it to be. Everything that we have done so far and continue to do is just focused on making sure that the meat soft, tender, and juicy and moist. Seriously, clean your workstations, wash your hands. You shouldn't be continuing past this step without doing that. Okay, so here you can see we have 3 sets of ribs packaged, foiled properly. You are going to put these in the oven, of course, and you can see here, 250 degrees. That gives you about 60 degrees of headroom between the target temperature of 190 and what the oven itself is going to be set at. That also allows us to go low and slow as long as we possibly can in order to get the meat as tender as possible. So I am cooking 3 sets here. I do have a convection oven and it is set to convect. So that means the heat should be blown around by that fan and we're going to get as even of a temperature across the oven as we possibly can. Every hour, I will come and rotate the pans. I rotate them front to back, meaning I rotate it this way, and I rotate it top to bottom, meaning this tray here is going to go to the middle, middle to the bottom, bottom to the top. That way I ensure a consistent cook throughout the entire 4 to 5 hour process. So Alton Brown always said your patience will be rewarded, and in the case of these ribs, that is absolutely the case. This is about 4.5 hours after I started the cooking process, and you can see the meat has pulled away from the bone. These guys look amazing. The final step here is just going to be to apply barbecue sauce. Now this is just regular stubs. My wife even likes some chili garlic that we can get in the Asian section. You put it on, you spread it around so that it has a nice even coat on the ribs. I focus on the meat side. I don't focus on the back side either. So once you have a nice even coat, you're going to want to put it in the broiler or you're going to throw it on the grill. And only really for about 30 seconds are you going to do that. You don't have to do it for a long period of time because then you just end up with burnt sugar and that never tastes very good. So once it comes out of the oven, you're going to see it's literally going to be pull apart if you completely removed the membranes. You can see in the upper portion of the bones there, they're coming off of the meat very easily. There is a piece of cartilage here with these particular ribs simply because these are spare ribs. If you have kids, probably focus on the baby back style ribs. They're going to give you a easier in eating enjoyment, basically, an easier experience there for those kids. So there you have it, fall off the bone ribs, or if you like a little bit of stick-to-itness, just leave the membrane intact. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.